Welcome once again to Blue Soup Sessions. I'm Paolo Kernahan.
And I'm Narrisa Mandol.
Just some food for thought there with our opening monologue. I don't know if you what thoughts you had on that, Narrisa.
Well, there are a couple of things that you mentioned that I think we can talk about. The first one being, you said that Dr. Joe had suggested to the People's Partnership that they had a fantastic opportunity to change the nature of our political or national discussion. Is that something you agree with, and do you think that they squandered that opportunity?
Well, in fairness to the People's Partnership, I understand what Dr. Joe was going for, and it was something that was filled with hope. The problem is that the People's Partnership was coming together at the time, so they had to wrangle with the complexities of putting together two parties with opposing ideologies, but also they had to put up a serious competition to the People's National Movement. And I don't think that they felt that would be their best gambit, which would be to go out there and try to convince the people to be a bit more insightful on national issues. They would basically have gone with the same play sheet that the PNM was using, which was appeal to the base, tell them what's bad about the opposing party and what they intend to do instead. It's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult proposition to ask a political party to take the high road and essentially what is a winner-take-all competition. That would be like asking the People's Partnership to flog themselves with their own stick while giving the PNM an advantage. They already knew that the PNM was on the ropes, so why squander their own advantage by trying to elevate the national discourse? Now the question is, could they have done it once they got in office?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. When they were in office for those 5 years, could they not have attempted to raise the level of politics in the country? Instead, what ended up happening is that they attempted to buy likes.
Well, yes. I think that I've actually heard a People's Partnership member of Parliament at the time saying that what they did was level the playing field by giving groups left outside of the sphere of opportunities that were provided by the People's National Movement. They wanted to spread those opportunities around, and by opportunities, obviously, we're talking about contracts, access to jobs, all this kind of thing. And leveling the playing field is one thing, but what happened essentially was a squander mania that in the long run condemned the party to being ousted at the polls. And I also heard someone say at the time, and I mentioned this, I think it was written in one of these promos that we'd sent to the station, that the People's Partnership, much like most political parties in this country, spend their 5 years in office rather than changing the national discourse. They spend that 5 years in office working on getting the next 5 years in office. So there's not really much of an opportunity to change the political culture, and that's why we're stuck in this endless loop where it's 5 years, and then before you know it, we're into the fourth year of the PNM's term in office, and it almost feels as though we just voted for the same things just the other day.
It almost feels as though it has been a long-running election.
Yeah, well, that is something that we're going to talk about a little later on, but that's exactly the point. But that again, going to your question about whether the People's Partnership squandered that opportunity, I think, as you discussed, they were more concerned about using a different method of engaging the population, and that was this idea of inclusion by giving people more access to jobs, being more grandiose with these gestures of contracts and all this kind of thing. And naturally that did not work in their favor, because what emerged eventually was a sort of a squander mania ethos that obviously members of the public took advantage of. If money given away, people will line up to take it,
And obviously if you're giving me a gift, if I accept that gift, that doesn't mean I have to change my opinion about you or like you, or in this case go and vote for you or defend you.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a hard lesson for them to learn. But there's something else that you mentioned.
Well, I don't think that they learned that lesson at all. Are you talking about it? You think that they're members of the People's Partnership sitting down reflecting on their errors? I don't believe that. We've not heard anything from any of their public utterances from the day that they were ousted from office to suggest that they're sitting in a ponderous reflection. at least not from my reading of the ground. I don't know if you've read different. But I don't think they've learned from that at all. And I don't think any politician will learn from that, because every political party, when you're in opposition, they see it as, well you're 5 years in waiting to get back in.
Certainly the PNM did not learn from the mistakes of the People's Partnership, because the PNM has come back into office almost as though we're still in the 70s.
Yeah.
And we're still in the 80s. So, you dare not question anything that they're doing, and we know what's best. So you don't worry yourself. We don't know what's best. You don't ask any questions. You don't have any comments. So I guess in a sense, none of the political parties grow or evolve or develop.
No, I'm glad that you reminded me about this idea of the PNM coming in with 70s era ideologies, 70s era, 70s and 80s era approach to doing things and to relating with the public. Because these politicians have never evolved themselves, so they're using the same guidebook that they got when they joined politics, when they got into politics, and that is why many of them seemed taken by surprise when the public condemns them or attacks them on a decision that they've made, or some maneuver that comes to light, and the public if you look at how the public reacted to the ferry scandal. It's almost as though this government reacted with surprise. They're thinking to themselves, well, wait a minute, where these people get all of this mouth? And that's because the ground has changed to a considerable extent, but politicians themselves haven't. And they're struggling in that shifting environment. Now, the environment hasn't changed so much that the political discourse has changed. What is happening is that people have now they have more platforms to voice their disgust with the way the country is being run. It doesn't mean that they're actually using those platforms to contribute to or add their own thoughts and ideas on how the country could be run, but
some of them are.
Some people are, but not in the kind of numbers that which in fact, what people are using these platforms for, to a considerable extent, is if you're not belly aching, you're rushing to the defense of these politicians. And that is, I think, one of the biggest problems that we continue to have in this country, is this blind loyalty and this willingness to leap in front of a flying bullet for every politician in this country. And that you remember that
I would never forget
yes,
that. Are we
yes.
talking about the same thing? It was either in the run up to an election or during the campaigning, and we were in a particular constituency, and there was this one lady who was very upset because is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think you're being
she was very upset because the public and the media, we had the audacity to question what the then Prime Minister was doing.
Well, this was Patrick Manning was under considerable public pressure
because of the smelters, because of the secret church.
Of course, there was crime. The chambers were on his back because of crime and all this kind of thing. And this, I know exactly what you're talking about. And this woman stood in front of the
the cameras.
In front of the cameras, and she wailed, "Leave my Prime Minister! Leave my Prime Minister!" And I said, "Well, but this woman,
yes.
this woman was apoplectic in her defense of Manning, a man whom she probably never met, has very little connection to." And I thought, I have never really seen that much passion in an individual, and obviously lives in very modest humble circumstances, but she is so
from a neglected community,
but so heavily invested in her Prime Minister. When every time I hear people say "my Prime Minister," I feel sick. What does that mean? My Prime Minister is almost like, oh my Lord. It's so ridiculous.
Well, back in the day in England, you had to say,
my
"Yes,
lord.
my lord."
Yes, my lord. Yes, my lord. And that is I think that's one of the things that really holds us back, is this dogged hero worship that we have. But even in politicians who really have done little to nothing to alleviate the suffering in some of the more impoverished or neglected communities across this country, that is where you find the largest repositories of the most hell-bent defenders of both political parties, be it the UNC or the PNM. And what people are yet to appreciate is that is what keeps us down. That is what holds us back.
Well, we have this discussion a lot about this concept of hero worship. And I mean, we always ask the question, what is it about us? I mean, it's not something that is unique to Trinidad, but we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago. What is it about us that would make us put a politician who's not doing his or her job, we would put that politician before ourselves, before our families, before our communities, and before our country? I mean, I have no answer. I mean, some people say it's because of race. We have thought, okay, well, maybe that, you know, these folks are living through these politicians, so it's enough for them to see Keith Rowley or Kamala Persad-Bissessar, that they have progressed.
One of theirs.
They have progressed. They are in the nice clothes. They are in the fancy vehicles. When they're going through the airport, they don't have to join the lines like the rest of us. Is it that we're happy because they have reached that level?
So these
and we're happy
politicians,
to live through them.
right? So these politicians are essentially living the vicarious victories that people assume that as ordinary schmoes in the street that they can never have themselves. So it's good enough to have one of ours make it out there, as it were. I can't really expect too much of myself other than for myself, other than roads, lights, water. You know, several years ago, when I was in this former life that I lived, I was hosting one of these many morning television shows, and we were going through a local government election, and I had gone through the process of interviewing a lot of prospective candidates, and many of them were talking. I was asking, well, what do you consider to be the most pressing concerns for the people in your area? And invariably what would come up is, well, people would like to see some more lights put in, they'd like to have their roads repaired, and they'd like a more steady and regular supply of water. And I got to thinking, everybody I interviewed during the lifespan of that campaign came in with the same thing. And I felt, well, this is so sad, because while these are things that people should ask for, you shouldn't have to ask for that. That should be the basics that you get. None of those things, the roads, the lights, the water, actually lend themselves to the development of communities, the lifting up of communities, the
empowerment of communities,
the germination of aspirations among young people who live in those communities to start a business, if they have children themselves, to put them on the right path. None of those things do that. So you are asking for people's vote on the strength of the very basics. And I felt that what was particularly unfortunate about that was not that the prospective candidates were peddling that this is what they meant to do. It was that this appeared to be sufficient for the electorate themselves, that they would be happy if they could just get this drain fixed. Now, I don't like to play down or ridicule people for asking for these things, because I don't live in communities where there are mosquito infested drainage, the roads are deplorable. But like I said, those things should be fixed anyway. But the communities and the politicians need to inspire each other.
In other words, we need to see those things as basics.
Yeah.
So for instance, of late, I'm seeing that the People's National Movement on their Facebook page, they're posting a lot of these pictures of things that they've done, and one particular picture.
There's a hell of a lot of stuff that's being done in a very, very rapidly, yeah?
Indeed.
As we're coming into we're going to be in the fourth year, wrapping up the fourth year of their term in office. All of a sudden, everything is being condensed into one very short time frame.
So one of the photos was of a recently paved road, and some people came on the post and they were asking, well, where's the drains? Where are the pavements? And then other people came and said, well, oh gosh, you can't please everybody. Why y'all just can't be grateful for the roads?
Why should I?
Why do you need to be grateful? You're paying for the roads. We are paying for the roads, and a road is a basic thing that we all should have. Roads, drains, bridges.
Well, listen, putting in a road without drainage is like buying a torchlight without the batteries. It makes no damn sense. And I'm gonna go on and on about this as we go through the course of this show. It pains me to see people rushing to the defense of politicians like that, because they're the ones who have to live in these communities. So when it floods because you just put in a road and insufficient drainage, the politicians are not the ones who are going to come mopping out your house. You're going to have to eat those words that you use to defend incompetence.
But even during horrible floods, there's still people who defend.
Well, let's say that's nature. That's nature. You can't acts of God.
You can't prevent acts of God, and I mean that's just sad.
But again, going on this, we want to make it very clear this idea of blind loyalty and strident defense of politicians. Let's give another example. we were doing some digging around to find out about how long it would take now to renew a passport, because we'd done it some time ago, and the passport office at that time was going through a fit of renewal. I mean, it was bizarre. You remember there were actually people standing around asking if they could help you. I said, "What's wrong with you? You're sick or what? You trying to help me?" But anyway, so the passport office was the picture of efficiency, and we got those passports both probably in about
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm seeing that it could be
6 to 8
anyway,
weeks.
6 to 8 weeks to a millennium is the new normal. And what is happening there is that in the absence of proper systems in place and policies to ensure that reform sticks, behavior is reverting to type. People are going back to their old ways, and consequently the delivery of service is going back to how it used to be, the bad old days, as it were. And these are things that we should never accept, because we've seen that it can be done properly. So if it can be done properly and we've benefited from that, why should we go back to, even as we advance in years and in time, we should go back to incompetence, sloth, and inefficiency? And that is absolutely unacceptable. Yet we don't hear the kind of outcry that we should be hearing about these things. And some people suggest that that's because we are now so disappointed and frustrated with investing our votes. And by the way, a vote is not enough. A vote is just something that you do. But in order for you to get true value out of your vote and your franchise, you have to be actively involved in the change that this country requires. But we'll talk about that a little later on. But again, our systems are allowed to crumble around us while people line up on Facebook to defend the government, because they somehow see a connection between the attacks against the government as attacks on them, which is bizarre, because at the end of the day, the people who are defending this incompetence, defending the poor performance of the passport office, they have to go and get a passport too, unless they're all diplomats and they don't belong for that. But they have to use the same services. So why are they so prepared to swallow that treatment, swallow that shoddy service, all in the name of defending people they've never seen?
Well, I just speak about defense. Recently, over the weekend, in fact, the Airports Authority announced that they were transitioning from
male to female? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, from manual payment systems to this electronic payment kiosk
Well,
for your parking fees.
Flow has it.
Courts has it.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought they'd get in, and nothing is wrong with that. So they made the announcement on Sunday, and you wake up this morning and you're seeing, that's Sunday, today's Wednesday, you're seeing pictures of these long lines at the airport, because guess what? The majority of machines, they failed. So there was one machine, I think, that was working, that everybody had to line up at to pay. Now, what is the interesting thing about that is that on the picture of that long line, somebody said sabotage.
Yeah, because somebody took it upon themselves to try to make the government look bad by going to sabotage all of these new machines. Never mind, they were so ninja-like in their execution of this sabotage that none of the security in the airport were able to catch the perpetrator in action.
The person who said that, sabotage, doesn't realize that it's more of an indictment on the security at the Airports Authority than it is on any alleged saboteur. So what she's saying or alleging is that, okay, the security systems at the airport are so bad that somebody would have been able to go to the airport and sabotage 4 machines.
Yeah. Now, never mind, the person was adamant that this was sabotage and left it at that, but skipped over several important facts. And the first of all, one of which you've already alluded to, and that is that this was a change that was announced on Sunday and you put it in place on Monday, perhaps. Secondly, the release issued by the Airports Authority,
which was just minutes ago, maybe about a half hour, 45 minutes ago.
That, well, this what we saw, the failure of the machines was just the typical normal teething problems. They use the word normal. So you know that there are normal teething problems with the implementation of new technology, but you did not do any smooth transition from...
No plan B.
No plan. So there's no plan B. They removed all of the people who do the physical processing of the parking fees, and they just move it to the machines. So that doesn't make any sense. in your own release, you acknowledge that there would be normal teething problems, but then you don't put anything in place. So defending incompetence is incompetence. Mind you, the idea is brilliant. It's fantastic. We would love anything that improves the efficiency. Went on this long thing about improving the user experience. Listen, you're paying that goddamn parking fee. It's not a user experience, right? That's a spa. You have a user experience in a spa, not a parking lot. Well, it depends on who you're in the parking lot with, but that's a different show, right?
Oh my word.
So, but again, people are so determined to jump to the defense of their government. Nobody invited them. And this is what politicians must really enjoy, this, that they have all of these minions out there willing to throw themselves on their swords for a politician that they've never met, never seen, and are never actually going to benefit from in the long run.
But you know what I found interesting about that press release? First of all, it was super short, and they gave no reasons for the failure of the system.
Yeah, well, it's some mystery gremlin that appeared in the machines, and they also said that it was. They say it was
a short duration.
Short duration. Yeah. Although the people in that long line would beg to differ on the duration of that. But anyway, the main point is.
In fact, I saw a picture right here at the station where someone took a picture of the malfunctioning machines, and it said something to the effect that wrong PDF inserted.
No, if I got that, I wouldn't know what the hell to think. I was, wait a minute.
PDF?
I didn't walk my flash drive. I supposed to put a PDF in this thing?
To pay your parking ticket.
Imagine that.
What kind of PDF?
Oh. But anyway, the real point that we were...
but you know, which also, I don't know if you remember, when we had this this ferry saga, the sea bridge, the ferry, you know, which boat was it that kept shutting down? I don't remember. And they kept saying...
That is a real tough question, because there were so many boats
that kept shutting down, right? And they kept saying sabotage, sabotage, sabotage. And I was asking, but again, it comes back to the same thing. Where's the security?
We are a nation of saboteurs. People sabotaging boats, electronic kiosks. So what I find amazing is that people will do the most remarkable contortions to defend their political party and to find some peculiar, outlandish, fantastical explanations for things that are plainly wrong, plainly indefensible, plain garden variety incompetence, and people will sit down and sketch out skits to explain these things when it's basically right there for your eyes to see. This is the fruit, the result of pure incompetence. And that to me is the story there, with the most recent example of that at the Airports Authority. Basic planning, not applied here. Right? So we're going to take a short break, folks. We'll continue chatting about this idea of governance versus politics. And of course, we'd like to hear your questions and comments on this topic, because that's really what this is about, involving you and making you a bigger player in your own destiny. So stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. You're tuned into Blue Soap Sessions. I'm Paolo Kernahan.
And I'm Narrisa Mandol.
We're talking governance versus politics, and we've been talking so far about the effect that blind loyalties has in stymieing this country from developing, from advancing, from moving forward. I think that's one of our greatest problems. But also, our political parties tend to focus so heavily on politics when they're in office, even when they're in office, that there's very little room left for governance, and no one political party is guilty of that. Every party that comes in has to spend a fair amount of time rubbishing the previous administration, what they did, how much money they spent, and how they empty the treasury, this metaphorical building where there's this huge chest with a dragon sleeping on top of all these gold coins. Every political party does that, although some do it with more aplomb than others. This current administration spent almost all of the time thus far pointing to the sins of the previous administration, threatening to bring legal actions. This case is coming, charges coming for this one, that one. But what people have always been more concerned about is, listen, we have an economic crisis on our hands. Crime is at an all-time high, and notwithstanding the strident efforts of the police commissioner and the police service, violent crime is still a very serious problem in this country. Tourism is practically non-existent in this country. So we have pressing concerns that need to be attended to.
There's
right
a time
now.
for politics and there's a time for governance, and unfortunately right now we don't seem to realize that. So while the country is burning, while it's crumbling, we're still playing politics. As I mentioned earlier in the show, it feels like we have been part of a long-running election.
Yeah.
We're not settling down and getting to work on the issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, it's something that the opposition, just to be clear, the opposition is also guilty of. Opposition members of parliament politicize issues in their constituencies for the sake of scoring points against the government, and that does not do their image any favors. It doesn't bolster their image as a party worthy of consideration. If the opposition is keen to demonstrate that it's rehabilitated itself, then they should focus more on the issues, come forward. And I know that there is, to a certain extent, discussions on what the United National Congress attempts to bring to the table in the 2020 election campaign at their Monday night forums, but that's not enough. We haven't heard anything about the party's perspective on why they lost office in the wake of all of these allegations of financial impropriety, crime, corruption, all these sorts of things. We haven't heard anything, and I suppose their attitude is, well, if we say something, that is to admit culpability, but we're not going to admit to anything. But obviously things went awry, so there has to be an admission of that. There has to be contrition before you can expect the population to take you seriously, because what we hear all the time, and maybe they don't hear it often enough because they're living inside their own bubble, but what we hear often enough is that, yeah, this government bad, them, oh God, boy, come land them, and we can't bring them back. That's a very, I mean, whether or not you put any stock in that, that is very much a real thinking that is out there in the public. So the opposition is again at fault for not doing the needful to present themselves as
and any opposition. It's not just the
Right.
UNC opposition, it's any party in opposition. And you know what I always say, more than just talking, because it's easy to talk. You can do things in opposition to demonstrate what you're made of.
Yes.
So just because you're in government, that doesn't mean you can't go in your constituency and say, okay, well, look, these are the needs of my constituency. I may not have the funds, but you know what? I can raise money. I can do a fundraiser. I can start a GoFundMe campaign, or I can get people to donate their labor. So let's say, okay, the roads are in horrible condition. We're not supposed to be fixing roads, granted, right? But, you know, we have to take matters into our own hands sometimes. What we can do is say, guys, who's willing to donate material? Who's willing to donate machinery? Who's willing to donate free labor? And let's get this thing done.
Yeah, but it's much easier to just say that we're not getting any money from the central government and perhaps leave it at that. You know, I often wonder, what is the point of local government elections if it's just going to be a proxy war on the ground preceding the general election, for a proxy war for the political parties? Because all of these regional corporations, all of these local government bodies, the various regional corporations are in a shambles, and the excuse that you hear is, well, we're not getting enough money from the central government. Well, when they were getting enough money under the central government, the money was squandered. You remember the story of, I think it was in the Siparia Regional Corporation, where a councillor burst in on a room, and all of these people were just, everybody was, it was like a all-force tournament.
It was the chairman of the Siparia Regional Corporation.
Right.
And he could not find any of his workers. So he went looking for his workers, and he threw open this door.
Scatter like cockroach, everybody went.
He saw all of them,
boy, have a real good hand, boy.
all of them were playing all fours.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is something that we have seen with our own eyes.
Yeah. I don't even want to tell, because I know
We
people
have gone to state property and seen workers making a big cook in the middle of the yard.
on a big ring stove too,
Yeah.
big ring stove in the middle of the yard, in the middle of the day too. So we understand that that's part of the culture. That's part of the culture. But at the same time, it is. I really wonder what is the purpose of these regional corporations if all they're going to do is tell you, well, we don't have the funding support of the central government and we can't do anything. You had the money. I mean, money was flowing through these regional corporations, these local government bodies, like through a duck. And nothing was done with it other than squandering the money the same way that the central government did, because that is the political culture.
But I want to bring it back to this concept of politics versus governance. And recently there was a sword turning. You have to help me here with this project for the Toko Valencia Road.
Intersection to Toko Main Road upgrade. It rolls off the tongue. Let me read it. It's a $196 million Valencia intersection to Toko Main Road upgrade. And there's also, I don't think it's included in the cost here, but there's also the Toko port that's meant, it's conceived to be part of that mega project. That's something that we've talked about in the past on this program, and that is governments can only conceive of projects if they have to be huge. Each
government must have its own mega project.
Yeah, the previous government's mega project was the Point Fortin Highway. There was the Couva Hospital. This government's mega project is
Manning's project with all those Unicod projects.
The waterfront complex, all this sort of thing. And anyway, let's get back to this. So we've taken extracts of the newspaper report about this. So governments turned the sword to begin the $196 million Valencia intersection to Toko Main Road upgrade. The project is expected to be expected to be completed on the eve of the 2020 general election. Told the population felt this is Rohan Sinanan was told the population felt the upgrade was the perfect timing. Well, I don't know how this. Told the population felt the upgrade was the perfect timing to garner votes for the Toko Sangre Grande seat in the upcoming general election. Sinanan, the works minister, shot back, I guess, presumably at a journalist. Anything that is an election ploy is a good thing. If it wasn't good, it wouldn't be an election ploy. So saying something is an election ploy means it's a good thing. Anytime you hear a politician say it's an election ploy, that means it's a good thing. Because nobody would bring an election ploy if it wasn't good. I'm happy it was an election ploy. Apart from the fact that that's total garbage, it points to the stark reality that this is his thinking. That's what it's for. Well, we're doing something for the public to stir them up to go there and vote.
But when I read it, I thought to myself, but he has no shame.
Oh, by the way, I finished it. He said whether it was an election ploy or not, which he just said it is. He was happy for the people on the eastern seaboard, insisting that for too long they have been neglected. By whom? You and your people. So what are you talking about? They always behave. The prime minister said the same thing. They've been basically left out. They're behind God back. Who put them behind God back? It is you. It is you put them behind God back. All of a sudden you realize, oh my God, these poor people eating coconuts and crabs. They neglected to their own devices. Who has left them neglected? Who has allowed these communities on the East Coast to be left behind as the country has marched forward? It is the government, not them. But anyway, so
when I read Sinanan's comments, which is basically he's saying, so what if it's an election ploy? An election ploy is not necessarily a bad thing. I just thought that was, first of all, he has no shame, and it's also insulting to us.
Yeah, well, yes.
You know, that everything that we do has to be couched in politics. It has to be seen in the context of politics. And you know what? So what if it's an election ploy? It's almost as though, so what if it's people's lives? So what if it's people's livelihood?
Yeah.
Because what he's admitting there is that it could in fact be an election ploy, that we are launching this project to make it seem that we're doing something to develop that part of the country. And it may very well never be finished or take an extremely long time to be finished. Because my question is, where's that money coming from?
Well, the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, said, borrowing could be a good thing if you use the money for the right things. Of course, they're the only people who know what the right things are, because they weren't happy when the previous administration was borrowing money. But anyway, you touched on something that's very important, and that is this whole idea of insulting. It's insulting to the people, but insulting to whom? Because when this mystery ferry, this ferry that's materialized out of nowhere, this 1-year lease of this vessel from Malta, I believe it is.
It's a Maltese company.
Right, a Maltese company, right? So anyway, this ferry has materialized out of nowhere to ease the woes of the Tobagonians suffering from the shoddy ferry service. And one person came online and said, oh God, boy, people complaining about this, people talking, because obviously there are grave concerns about the improprieties that may be surrounding the lease, the secret lease of this vessel, given our recent history with all of the boats.
Well, nothing is finalized, I think, from what I read.
Right, but obviously there are concerns given the recent history that we've had with the vessels, the Cabo Star, and the Galleon's Passage, and all of the bacchanal that surrounded those vessels. People are obviously concerned that this deal has been arrived at somewhat secretly, and someone came on Facebook and said, "Well, listen, Ole, you'll never be happier. Just be happy that the government is bringing to an end the suffering of people in Tobago." And someone came back and said, "Yes, after 4 years of suffering the people in Tobago." What the other person, what the person who was responding to that comment failed to mention is that this was a problem that was ostensibly created
because of political spite.
because of political spitefulness. It was created. A perfectly serviceable ferry service in the run with the Spirit, the TNT Spirit and the TNT Express and the Galicia, that did not have anywhere near to the number of breakdowns under the previous administration. All of a sudden, nothing was working properly. The Galicia was banished from the islands, and suddenly the sea bridge fell apart. This was a manufactured problem. So, in other words, here again, the defenders of the government running to demand that people acknowledge and accept that the government is actually doing something good for the people of Tobago, when the truth is that they actually ruined the sea bridge in the first place.
Here's my take on that. If you had a problem with the Superfast Galicia, right, and you felt as though you were being swindled, hear what? There's nothing wrong with you saying, look, I think that I can get a better deal or a better service, but at least put it in place before you chase away the current service provider. I mean, anybody with a brain would think about that. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with them saying, look, I believe that we could do better than the Superfast Galicia.
Yeah.
But at least put things in place before you end the service with the Superfast Galicia.
Yeah, and that's the main problem, folks. And we just give you a few examples to explain how the infiltration of politics in governance destroys the country. We're not able. Now I understand that there will be a measure of politics in the governance of the country, but when it dominates it so utterly.
I know we have to go to a break, but I just want to say this one last example. The economy of the country.
Which apparently has jumped out of a recession, didn't you know?
That's what I'm saying. You are talking about people's ability to earn a living and to pay their bills. Because obviously if the economy is not performing, there are going to be a lot of segments in society suffering. You have Paula Gopi-Schoon announcing that the recession is over. But before that, you had the Prime Minister appearing on a media interview saying that things were still tough. Then later, I think it was last year, during his mid-year review,
Yes.
we had Colm Imbert saying that things are better now, he can see clearly now.
Well, he also said that we're on the verge
We
of...
have rebounded.
Yes.
Right? And what is disgusting about that is that you're playing politics with people's ability to provide for themselves.
Yeah.
Not many of us are going to be able to thrive in a situation where an economy is floundering. And they have no shame.
But by the way, before we go to the break, notwithstanding Paula Gopi-Schoon's optimism and Colm Imbert's optimism, the picture on the ground is quite the opposite. We'll take a short break, folks. We are going to come back and chat about some of what we can do as ordinary citizens to be part of the change in the political culture in Trinidad and Tobago. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Blue Soap Sessions, folks. We're talking about governance versus politics, and what we wanted to discuss in this period of the program is the idea of some solutions, some possible solutions, and how you ordinary citizens can play a role in changing the political culture. But first we have to acknowledge a few things, and that is that no one really is willing to take the lead in raising the level of national discussion. I remember many years ago interviewing Basdeo Pandey, who probably is the only person who is known for more quotations than
Shakespeare?
And he said, listen, in politics you have to meet the people where they are. And while I agree, because you can't speak to people in a language that they don't understand, or you can't relate to them on a level that they don't jive with, but what I was also asking him is, well, can you also meet them where they are, but bring them up to where you are, or at the very least bring them up to a higher level to convert the type of conversation that we're having, so that they can be drafted into the process of changing the society, so that they can be shown how they have a role, an important role in changing the society, whether it is by improving their productivity, by inspiring them to go for entrepreneurship, or to be more inspiring ingenuity in the population. Couldn't you do that? And I think that concept, that ideology is defeated to a large extent by our refusal to allow of space for raising the conversation, raising the level of debate, is always kept down in a sort of a, well, what people like to call
Well,
ad hominem attacks, personal
right,
attacks.
but what I find interesting is, on one hand, we condemn what we call gutter politics, but then when people come forward and they want to stick to the issues, oh, that's too boring. You know, and I mean, we have been accused of that sometimes for, you know, we've been told that we need to dumb down our conversation. So who is going to take the lead in raising the level of national discussion? And by that, what I mean is, you don't have to come in here and use fancy words or, you know,
Well, you don't have to use
So-
yes, you don't have to put on airs, you don't have to use highfalutin language. There are many people who are quite capable of relating to ordinary folks, but using the channels of communication to inspire them to think more, to ingest more, and to be more curious about the country that they live in.
The other thing is, society is made up of different segments, and you will always have people who like to hear that kind of gutter talk. You know, they call it pecan, but I think it's gone past pecan. It's more gutter, right?
And
Conversation. But there is a segment in society where we want to hear about issues. We want to have those national debates amongst our politicians. You know, I don't look at the Parliament channel anymore because it's extremely painful to have to listen to those people talk.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a set of rubbish they're talking in
Yeah.
Parliament. So what I'm saying is, there will always be those in society who love that kind of stupid talk.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's another segment where we want to hear about issues.
Yeah.
And nobody's catering to that segment.
Yeah, that's true. And additionally, what often happens is that most people who try to focus on issues, who try to throw light on, for example, as we were doing the question of the this ferry that was secretly agreed upon, this 1-year lease of a ferry from Malta, we're accused automatically of being political. We have access to grind. We have political agendas. Well, we all have it. Every human being on this planet has an agenda. An agenda is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also wrong to assume that everyone has a political agenda. I have an agenda, and my agenda is that I want to live in a country where things work, that I can go into my house without being carjacked or being attacked by a bandit. I want to be able to go to the passport office and get a renewal before I die. So I have an agenda. Yeah, I have an agenda, and my agenda is to live in a country that is better, more efficient. It's kind and friendlier to its own people, and it has aspirations of being greater than it is. Nothing's wrong with that agenda. And if that makes me a political creature, then so be it. But that actually, I will go into that in a little while. So we should be careful of rubbishing everyone who has criticisms or questions about the way the country is being run. We should be careful about rubbishing those people as being political, having an axe to grind, or there's a stinking PNM or a stinking UNC. When I was on the morning shows, I was always accused of being either a PNM or a UNC, sometimes both in the same morning. And I said, well, then that's perfect. I hate them both. You know, if you accuse me of hating the PNM and hating the UNC, you got it right. I hate them both because they've not delivered to this country what they've promised, and
Well,
in fact they've done quite the opposite.
they've both let us down.
Of
And I
course.
think in terms of a solution, we can do some reflection, right? And we can try to stick to the issues, right? We can try to have a discussion in terms of nationhood.
Yeah.
How is this going to benefit us in terms of progress?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we can do is take personal responsibility for the things we say, the things we write, and ask ourselves, am I sticking to the issue, or am I getting personal?
Am I also being objective? I know there are many people out there who, under the guise of being activists, claim to be objective, claim to be journalists, but they really aren't. So we need to be more objective, we need to be more open-minded, and we need to have a different concept of what political activism is. Political activism does not mean that you have to belong to one party or another. You can be working to do things to improve life in your community, fix roads by bringing together resources that you mentioned earlier on, a barbecue or something like that. All of that is political activism, because politics is improving the lives of people as well.
So we've run out of time.
Yeah, well, it's a broad topic that we've tried to deal with. Maybe something that we can revisit at another time. But I'd like to thank everyone for spending the time to listen to us. For those of you who have offended, well, we're grateful that we did. And for those of you who felt that you learned something, we're grateful for that as well. Thank you both. Well, not you both. Nobody can see you, but thank you all for listening.
Sarah behind the camera.
Yeah, Sarah behind the camera. She mean the main controller. Thank you all for listening, and we hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday and a fantastic rest of the week.
See you next Wednesday, everybody. Take care.